Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. Today's show is sponsored by Ringmaster, on a mission to launch B2B podcasts that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth. Ringmasterlive.com. Bam. Okay, I have hit the button. I know everyone's tired of me talking about the button, but I hit it and now we're going. There is no turning around. This is Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. There's only one way forward, and hopefully my guest and I will survive the Oompa Loompas and we will get to the end. But I'm excited to learn from her. She's an absolute badass, a SaaS marketing leader, a thought leader, decades of experience across corporate, agency, startup, all the things. Often described as a decaf dynamo, which we will get into, and no caffeine needed from her side, but I have made up for it by drinking twice as much caffeine on my side. So prepare yourselves. Co-host of the Closing Time podcast, Senior Director, Content and Digital Marketing at Insightly, Val Riley. Welcome to the show.
Casey, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And no coffee needed, huh? No caffeine needed.
I mean, I drink decaf, but people don't think that matters. Like, it's not real. So I did sometimes shy away from mentioning even decaf coffee. So.
Hey, when you gotta drink it, sometimes, last night I saw that I was making some tea and I was surprised that the tea was caffeine free. But I was actually thankful for that because I was drinking it at 9 p.m. So I was like, oh, good. I can actually sleep tonight. So I think there is some wisdom in you in this approach. So I'm going to pass you this thing so we get into it.
I'm ready.
It's heavy for me, but I know you're tough. Okay, here we go.
I'm reaching.
You want to grab that?
I'm reaching. Oh, I feel so powerful.
Okay.
So excited.
Right, yes, take Thor's hammer and smash for me some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Set the record straight once and for all.
Okay, the myth that I'm busting, Casey, is that remote teams are not as creative as in-person teams. And I'm going to tell you, it is absolutely a myth that we need to bust and get rid of.
Dang, we're going to get into this. I know we've had the idea of the debates between remote and not remote and all kinds of people saying this and this, but to zero in on creativity, man, I got to wonder, you can't get up in front of the dry erase board and draw together. You can't vibe in a session in the same room. Where does this come from?
So I'm thinking it's coming from a consortium of commercial real estate developers who are trying to push this narrative. And the idea that just being in proximity to people is what drives creativity is not only preposterous, Casey, it's actually an insult. Because the truth is, fostering creativity is a very purposeful act. It takes time, it takes trust, and it takes commitment. And the idea that you get any of those things just by sharing a water cooler or a break room with people is honestly just crazy.
Okay, so this is really cool because I've had remote companies. My last company was totally remote, except for a small team in New Hampshire. And then my new company is completely in person. Mm-hmm. I'm fascinated. So it sounds like we're taking apart the idea of the creativity and we're saying, what are the pieces, the trust, the time, the commitment. So talk me through that. Talk me through what it means to be creative anywhere.
Yeah,
remote or in person.
Sure. So I'm busting this myth because I'm drawing on my personal experience in 3 different companies. And in one, we were an in-person marketing team, 17 people in one office. And then in the next, we started off as an in-person marketing team of 10, but then a little thing that you may have heard of happened called COVID-19.
Yes.
And that team went fully remote. And the company I'm with now, we started out as remote and we have always been remote. And actually, I'm going to correct myself because I was recently told that we should not be using the word remote because it implies a barrenness or a sadness, that the word is actually distributed. We are a distributed workforce. So
I like that.
Well,
okay.
As a writer, Casey, words matter. And so I'm going to try to use that, but the common term is remote. Anyway, all 3 of those teams, the one that was 100% in person, the one that flipped halfway through, and the one that was 100% distributed, they all had tons of creativity with very different circumstances. And so to me, the variable there is not a physical location, right? It has much more to do with what the team is doing to encourage creativity. And in my opinion, that really comes down to like three major things. First of
Mm.
all, it has to be a commitment from leadership, right? So leadership has to say, this is important. And that could be your CMO or your creative director or all the way up to your CEO, depending on how big your company is. And a commitment at that level typically revolves around budget. And so I like to say you have to have some sort of sandbox budget that you're playing with, that you're going to say, well, we're going to try new things. And not only are we going to try new things, we're going to put money behind it. That's how leadership says creativity is important.
And try new things. This isn't just like try new remote apps. This is like just even in the work that we're doing, try new things.
It could be an app. It could be a new channel. It could be a new program. It could be a new campaign. It could be anything, but we're willing to if we come up with an idea, we're willing to put some muscle behind it to really see if it works, right? Because if you're coming up with all these creative ideas and they're just going nowhere because there's no money, that could be really disheartening for a creative team. So I feel like the commitment has to be there from leadership. And a lot of times that means there has to be dollars.
And this is on or off site, right? So these are the core ingredients, whether you're in person, not in person, distributed, remote, like have even if you come up with ideas, be able to play with them.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Put your money, your budget where your mouth is. Okay.
A second one I think is definitely culture. And by culture, I mean, do you have trust, right? Do I feel comfortable saying silly, creative things that might be off the wall or outlandish on a meeting with my colleagues? Because if we have trust, then the answer to that is yes. A marketing leader I worked for once said the two most important words in marketing are what if, right? And for you to say what if in a meeting of your colleagues and come up with something really outlandish, you have to trust that they are going to give you a yes and response and not that they're going to be slacking each other behind the scenes saying, did you hear that idea that Val just said? That's ridiculous, or this is a waste of my time, or, like trust is so important. And trust, comes from culture.
Yeah, you got to just chase those toxic people out of the company, right? Because how dumb was that? And it's like respecting that zone of like, hey, this particular moment in time, we're saying crazy things. We assume everyone's crazy.
Yeah.
I just came from a session where we're tackling a challenge, and at the end of discussing, I ideated, we discussed, and we were solutioning, and we have this tradition where we have to have at least one really wacky thing. And sometimes it's like, well, then just burn down the building or something like, and sometimes it's like illegal. And we always joke that our Fathom and Day recorders are recording all sorts of crazy things. And, but just to break the ice of like, oh, you just put it out there. And sometimes it just breaks the ice. It's funny. And maybe it turns into a real thing too.
Absolutely. And you sort of just, segued into my third big thing perfectly, is that, as a leader, it sounds like you are creating space for creativity. And what I mean by that is we're not going to be creative on our weekly status meeting as a team. We are not going to be creative on the weekly meeting with sales or the weekly meeting with customer success. Like those are not spaces where marketers have creativity. So being very purposeful about setting aside time for creative ideation is crucial. And you would be surprised how few companies, how few marketing teams actually do this. You must create that space, whether it's an hour every other week or at minimum an hour a month, where you are saying, we're stopping everything else. We are focusing on each other. We maybe come with an agenda. Maybe Casey, you're working on a project and you're kind of at a standstill. You're not sure where to go, or we've tried this, this campaign 3 different ways and it hasn't worked. Let's bring it to the creative ideation meeting and let's go through and see where we can, jump off and start something new. But if you don't have that space, that creative space either once a month or twice a month, what are you even doing is my question. And
Yeah.
Zoom is a great way to do that. And sometimes it's actually a little better than in person. And here's why.
Oh. Yeah. Tell me. This is
Well,
interesting.
we can be very comfortable when we're on Zoom, right? Maybe someone's sitting on their couch. Maybe someone is sitting with a cozy blanket wrapped around them in their home. Maybe someone has their cat on their lap or their dog in the corner, right? So
Yeah.
people are just intrinsically more relaxed in those environments versus sitting in a conference room, which can be, I'm tired, I'm cold. As a woman, I'm always cold in conference rooms. I can attest to that. I,
Yeah, I'm cold too. Like sometimes they're just cold in there, I don't know why. Keep
I'm
us awake.
I'm wearing uncomfortable shoes. I'm wearing uncomfortable clothes. I'm hungry. I'm, looking at the clock because I have to go pick up my kids in a few minutes or whatever. Like, I just feel like the office environment is good for a lot of things, but you wouldn't look at a typical office and say, oh, well, this place is fostering creativity like crazy, right? But when we're comfortable in our own spaces, I really do believe that we allow our minds to do more creative work. I also feel like, and this might be controversial, but maybe because I am more willing to present a crazy idea or even offer constructive criticism to a colleague that feels a little scary, but maybe when I'm on Zoom, it feels a little less scary because we're not in the same physical space. So
Yeah.
I feel like it might offer itself up more to constructive criticism. And further, in our creative meetings at Insightly and in previous companies, we've always left an open invitation to other departments to join us. So, not all the best creative ideas come out of marketing. And I have a great example from a software company I worked in 10 years ago, where we were struggling to name a new product. And someone from accounting who happened to be in the conference room that we were moving into made a comment, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, that's a great name. That could really be the name." So, from accounting, like you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect that, right? And
What do
so,
they know?
and so, it's very easy to invite other teams to your creative ideation meeting when it's in Zoom, right? When they're not walking into a room full of marketers, and maybe feel a little intimidated. So, even that aspect of getting participation from other parts of the company is facilitated by Zoom. It's just a little bit less intimidating, I think, to join it.
Oh my gosh, walking into a room that's already going with a meeting or about to, and it's at the right meeting. I've definitely been in, especially when there's a larger company. And am I supposed to be here? Am I in the? So embarrassing, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
now it could be a kind of the same embarrassing hopping on a Zoom, but not as bad because you could just click and you're
Yeah.
gone. You don't have to like silently back out and like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
Or
guys.
to turn your camera off, just be like, and chat in. I'm just going to observe, like how that's low risk,
Oh,
very low risk, right? So,
okay, because I was gonna say, like, it could be kind of awkward if you don't have the culture, like you were saying,
mhm.
of people, but you're cool having just, like, random people in the company join your marketing meetings and stuff?
Oh, for the creative ideation meeting, absolutely. Absolutely. You never know who's going to come up with a great idea. Also, like just an Insightly, we recently had one, and our head of growth business joined us. So she is
Okay.
on the sales team, head of growth, and just wanted to just talk to us about some ideas that she had that, that maybe could become something. And she said, but they're very early stage. And we're like, well, this is the place. This is where early stage ideas come, you know? And
Yeah.
she just participated just like the rest of the team. And it was great. We loved having her.
That's so cool. I mean, you can't live with sales, can't live without them. Who we kidding? No, no. Sales can be great, and sometimes that same personality that lets them like call a complete stranger with the high possibility that they're going to get rejected is the same kind of personality that'll just put an idea out there. A little bit of that courage that they have to just do that. So to get them on a call and get their ideas, maybe them say the thing that many people are thinking, but aren't sure if it's okay to say.
Hmm.
They might really help kickstart the creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
Dang. Um, well, I wanted to circle back. You had just mentioned that we're comfortable in our own spaces, and I was thinking about like how often that companies try to make their spaces more
Hmm.
creative, and is it subjective, right? Like I know it for me, I'm thinking like colors and cool pictures and bean bags and I don't know, like bubbly maybe or balloon soda, but like that's me. Somebody else creativity, maybe I want a lot of plants around
Hmm.
me. I want to feel like I'm in the jungle.
Hmm.
Um, is it like an individual? Have you seen that? Different people have their spaces, provide something different, but in the end, makes them all creative.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, when we used to do creative ideation sessions in person, I would be very purposeful, dim the lights in the room. I would bring in things
Mm.
like coloring books, sometimes Play-Doh or kinetic
What?
sand or something fun like that, that sort of got people tactily involved and like trying to highlight a different part of their brain. And
Damn.
it can be very effective. It's hard, Casey, to, I went to the dollar store or whatever and I bought a bunch of this stuff and I'm handing in this receipt and I'm thinking, boy, the accounting team is like, oh, marketing's playing with colored pencils and Play-Doh. Like, this is ridiculous. So it takes a little bravery, but yeah, I think you can do certain things in an office to try to get it to be a more creative space. Remotely, though, there are a million things you can do. So for instance, sometimes we open our creative meeting with an activity that is designed to get, other parts of the brain stimulated. And here's a real easy one. Someone's looking for a
Yeah.
tip. So have everybody take just a regular piece of paper and make 10 circles on it. And the circles are, about maybe the size of a silver dollar, or a little bigger. And then start a timer and then tell everybody, just fill in those circles, make things in those circles for the next minute. And at the end, share what you've done. So somebody made a chocolate chip cookie, a pizza, a pie, a globe, whatever, like whatever fits in the constraints of that circle, just kind of get your mind start thinking a little bit, outside the box or outside the circle in this case. But it's real easy to, find activities like that online where you can open a creative meeting and you don't have the benefit of, Play-Doh or dim lights or whatever, but you can find activities that get people to just maybe put aside their more analytical work for the next hour and
Hmm.
really focus on like different parts of their brain and activating different parts of their brain. So an opening exercise is just a great way to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into that because do you separate out, maybe yes, maybe no, do you separate out like brainstorming to solve a problem versus brainstorming to like grow beyond yourself? Does it matter that one is like, guys, we gotta fix this, and the solution's not totally apparent? And hey, where could we go from here?
Mhm.
Is it a different mechanism, or is it still kind of the same pattern in your mind?
That's a great question. I think we typically have an agenda for the meeting. And I know that sounds like the antithesis of creativity, but it's very
Mm,
loose. It's maybe 3 or 4 things that we are going to try to get to during that session. And if we don't get to all 3 or 4, that's fine. What's really great about that agenda, though, Casey, is that it's just a living doc that everybody has access to. So maybe during a given week, maybe it's an off week of the creative meeting, and you're struggling with something, or you're not sure about where to go, or maybe the graphic design team needs a little bit of inspiration. It's like a little dumping ground for you to say, I'm frustrated with this. I don't know where to go with it.
mm,
And you always just drop it in that agenda and it feels like you have done something, right? You have taken a step forward. And so it's
right.
when the team meets, we open up that agenda and we're like, okay, this is what people have been struggling with. This is what the team needs maybe a little extra for some more ideas on. So it can be like a release valve almost for when you're in a situation and you're sitting there by yourself and you're like, like, gosh, I just don't know where to go with this. I'm not sure what the next
Mhm.
step is. You just drop it on the creative meeting agenda. And then the next time the team meets, now you've got 8, 10 minds working on your problem with you. Very liberating. And
Mhm.
it also, like I said, it's a release valve for that pressure that we sometimes feel when we can't come up with the big idea or we can't find like a great creative solution to something.
What are you mentioned like your agenda might have 3 or 4 things. Could you sort of generally mention the kind of things that you might have on that agenda?
Right. So in our last meeting, one of the items was we were looking for ideas for what Insightly was going to do for Pride Month in June. And
Sure.
so it said, here's what we've done in past years. We kind of want to do something a little different, but I'm not the person in charge was like, I'm not sure what we should do. So that was one item on our agenda. A second one was we have been running promotions for one of our products. And all of those promotions, I'm disappointed to say, have been price related, price reduction promotions. And
Oh,
we're just
sure.
hearing from the team like, hey, this we had diminishing returns here. Like that's not resonating anymore. So we need something that's not a discounting promotion to try to generate some excitement around this product. So those are two examples of things that we covered. And and it's
Got it.
also great to expose other parts of the team to problems that maybe a manager or a campaign owner is facing because if you're a designer, you're getting the ideas ready to execute, but that gives the designer input all the way from the beginning of the ideation phase. So, it can be very empowering for different roles on the team as well.
So cool. I've never had more questions to follow up with you on,
Okay.
that I can remember on a podcast. So get ready.
All
Here
right.
they come.
Let's do it.
Um, what happens if you get into that great quiet moment where it seems like everyone is feeling the pressure and that we're all like, I don't know if there's anything else we can do." Have you ever encountered that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we'll come up with everything we can, and then typically we'll come up with an owner, right? And then that owner will say, "Okay, we've spent maybe 15 or 20 minutes on this. We're not crazy about what we have, but like let's just see." And sometimes we'll just marinate on it, and bring it back around to the next meeting. And that is brings me to our Slack channel where we have a running channel of competitive ideas, creative ideas in our Slack channel. So you can say, hey, I was on a walk with my dog 3 days after the creative meeting, and I kind of thought about this as a possible idea. So you can park it in that Slack channel. It's recorded, it's
Mm.
there. And then we may pick that up at the next creative meeting as well. So, the ideation does not happen in a box, right? Sometimes when we put our devices down, right? And we're walking the dog or we're in the shower or you're out for a run, sometimes something will come to your mind. So, I'm not saying every creative session is going to come out with 5 wins, that's unrealistic, but it does create that space to get people to continue to ideate on, off weeks.
So, couple things coming from you on that answer too. So, what I got from even just your approach to it is that the pressure is off to solve it this very moment.
Mhm.
Marinating's okay. Um, some other time, like we'll circle back around to
Mhm.
it, and then almost like just doing that maybe just frees up the spirit of creativity. Just okay, well, since we don't have to have something, maybe we have something, and then the Slack doc sounds cool.
Mhm.
Um, what's funny? One of my favorite gifts was this little notepad that like sticks to the wall in the shower. And you write on with this like waterproof pencil and the waterproof paper. And you can kind of just pull off the thing,
Right.
and then I think you're right. It's like the times we're walking and running and other things when we're doing something totally not marketing, totally not our job, that our brain is like, "Oh, don't worry. I've been thinking about that thing for a
Mhm.
while. Here's my thought."
Mhm.
You're like, "Whoa,
Mhm.
where did that come
Mhm.
from? That's awesome." So giving yourself the ability to, letting your team marinate gives them all the chance to access that moment, in some other downtime.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's a great point, because creativity on a deadline is a recipe for disaster, right? But if we're always being creative in our Slack channel, in our creative meeting agenda, we always know we have that time set apart. We can start, maybe ideating on something that we know is 3 or 4 months away. So just to get it going, commitment to setting aside that time, commitment to setting aside those technical resources. It puts you in a situation where you're not panicked and you're not like, well, we got to come up with something and we have to come up with something by tomorrow. Oh, that's brutal.
Plan ahead, start the process sooner.
Yeah.
Oh man, but that's the mic drop moment. When I heard you say that the creativity on a deadline is a recipe for disaster, holy cow. You just take that mic and just drop it on the floor, yeah, wow. Okay, another question I had for you was talking about the different teams, the different people you bring into the meeting. What is your take? Are some people more creative than others?
That's a great question. I don't believe that's the case. I do believe that some voices are louder than others. And when you are operating a creative ideation session and you are the facilitator, it is imperative that you draw out all of the voices. The people that are sitting quietly, that may not feel comfortable interjecting, even on a Zoom call, right? Certainly not in a room, but maybe on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Absolutely, stopping and saying, Megan, you look like you were about to say something, or, Courtney, you're a little quiet right now. Do you have something brewing? Every time I have done that, Casey, every time that person has something to contribute, but they just didn't feel like there was an opening in the conversation to make that contribution. So facilitating a creative ideation session online really involves, being hyper conscious of every participant and making sure that everyone gets a chance to contribute. It can be a little easier online, because you can see everybody's face very clearly. You don't have to look around the room. You've got everybody right in front of you. That could be nice. And also, you mentioned note taking, automatic note taking. When you have an automatic note taker, you don't have to worry about capturing all the ideas. You can focus on facilitating and getting contributions from everyone, because you're not sitting there jotting down notes.
Yeah, that's huge. It kind of reminded me of interview I heard. It was Lex Friedman interviewed Jeff Bezos. I don't know if you caught that one. Jeff talked about the idea of a little bit of a session like we're talking about here with his team, but he made everyone show up, and for 10 minutes, I mean, this is probably in person, but I could see this working no matter what location you're in. But for a period of time, everyone just read the brief together, or they just went through the data together. They're all in the same Zoom or meeting or room, not saying anything. They're just doing the reading, because if you say do it beforehand, no one does it beforehand. So they're all doing it then. And then after everyone had some time to process it, write some of their own thoughts and ideas down, then they opened it up. And that just reminded me of you saying, it's your responsibility. And I feel that myself personally. It's my responsibility to draw out the voice. Sometimes there are the people that are still processing or quiet, but they may have the winner. And what can I do to make sure they have the time to think about it? So, and then the safety and the trust to be able to say that out loud. Do you put people on the spot? Do you inquire of the people that haven't spoken yet? How do you approach that?
Well, I wouldn't want to say put them on the spot, but sometimes you can just look at body language and you can see someone's ready to speak, but a louder voice or a more consistent voice might cut them off. And so it's just being hyper aware of those folks that look like they're about to say something. Also, in our creative meeting, we'll have the chat is typically pretty active. So if someone is sharing their thoughts or ideas and someone maybe has an outlandish thought, they can put it in the chat. And so there'll almost be two conversations going at the same time, with people reacting to what's going on in the chat without interrupting the person. Or they'll say, I have this idea, it's a tangent parking lot item, and then blah, blah, blah. And so, we can pick up on that later, but still let the line of creativity that's happening in, live with voices keep going. So again, another way that, Zoom really facilitates that, where you really, in person, you might be able to like run up to the whiteboard and write something down, but it just feels like it'd be a lot more disruptive, I guess, but, super possible in addition. So.
Val, that is such a huge, that was like a little mind blowing moment there. The idea of allowing the chat, encouraging it, and having it's like the highway and you have
The off ramp,
the city street, and and so you can go, and I can even see that, where you're throwing stuff down and it's almost like that social proof of somebody else going like, oh my gosh, hey guys, Casey just said XYZ. Tell us more about that. That sounds cool. And then almost you get that acknowledgement, and that might help encourage you to say more about that. And if no one says anything, maybe you're good. But either way, you have that, and you're right. Otherwise, you'd interrupt. Man, I've been in some meetings where they like shut down the chat, and that is like the worst experience. Like I'm almost out at that point because all I have is the chat, just to say hi to friends, and but like. Yeah, encouraging that even more. That's really cool.
Yeah, because, creativity is not linear and it doesn't necessarily happen in order. It can happen and, where someone gets an idea and they want to just get it out to the group. Why not let people use the chat? It's just, we're making the technology work for us in a creative way.
So cool. Any other cool tech tips like that, or any other cool exercises? I actually, when you said write the circles, I did the circles on my page.
Oh, I like your fish.
I made a Pac-Man, some pizza, pepperoni, smiley face, a couple other things.
It's almost lunchtime here. I get the pepperoni pizza.
Oh, 100% right.
I would say another Slack channel that we use to foster creativity that every company should have, or a Teams channel. I'm not partial to Slack. Is competitive ideas. So like when you see a competitor that does something that blows you out of the water or super fun or interesting, and you're like, that's a great idea. Where do you put that, right? Maybe you don't want to put it in the channel for the marketing team because, that's full of stuff that's important to a day-to-day, but definitely have a place to drop that so that when you're, have a moment and you are interested in seeing something that a competitor is doing, you can open that Slack channel and be like, oh, look at that cool LinkedIn ad they ran, or look at that neat video that our competitor did. But having a place to park those, technology really enables that. Really be harder to do that in an in-person office, but technology makes it so you can do that. You can watch it whenever you want and, get that inspiration that maybe your colleague saw that they wanted to share with the team.
Dang, I literally just created a competitive ideas Slack channel just now. Not that it's magically going to start populating because I just created it, but yeah, what a cool idea. And then sometimes there's that feeling of like, oh, well, they're crushing us with this great idea, but having a Slack channel can help you embrace that and be like, let's learn from all these things. Let's not obsess over them, and also not put them in our main marketing channel because we've got our own great stuff, but it's good to keep tabs on everyone else too at the same time.
Absolutely.
Man. Well, I kind of shifting a little bit, like you know a lot. Where do you like to learn things? Are there podcasts? Are there books? What are the things you're looking at these days?
I'm definitely a podcast addict. So, I do like a lot of podcasts. And, it's almost like you said when we were talking earlier about, when you're not working, when you're out for a run, or you're, it's a great time to listen to a podcast, and then your mind can wander a little bit like, hey, that was a great idea. How does that apply to my business? So, marketing podcasts, and then there's a podcast that I absolutely love that I think speaks to the startup marketer in me, and it's called How I Built This. It's from NPR. It's about founders. And so, definitely not necessarily targeted to marketers, but there is always a marketing angle in there. And I love startup culture. And so if I listen to How I Built This, I know I'm going to hear an interesting story. And then there's always a great marketing lesson in there too. So I definitely recommend that. And, the golden voice of Guy Raz is just, it's wonderful. So you can't beat it.
You're right. Some of those guys just have like the coolest radio voices, and then even the way they talk. Do you think they talk like that in person too? They probably do. You're trying to hang out and get a pizza. Slice of pizza.
Yeah.
Now we're on that topic. And they're like, and then I looked at my slice, and it was nice. It was steaming hot. And you're like, oh goodness. Are you recording this? It'd be funny to just do a podcast of what is it like to be Guy Raz's friend?
Exactly.
And can he turn off his microphone? That is the question. Next question for you is really like, who are you? Who are you? Did you take me back in time, little you days, little Val, did you know you're going to be a marketing leader, a thought leader, really a creative catalyst and this encourager and all these things? Did you know?
So I knew early on that I loved to write. And what I discovered was that what I took for granted as a skill that I had, I learned very quickly that there's a lot of people who really are not good writers. And
Sure.
So it was interesting to me how much of a skill that was. And I started looking at, okay, well, where do really good writers make money?
I love that. How old were you when you thought that question?
I was probably in high school.
Okay.
Because I was editor of the high school newspaper. So super nerd, super nerd. And I was like, well, journalism sounds great, but there was just no money in journalism. And so I started understanding more about like marketing and advertising. And I was like, okay, well, this is where if you can write, you can probably make a lot of money. And then, of course, in the 90s was kind of the birth of inbound marketing. And then all of a sudden, content marketing really became a career. It became something that was highly valued. And it was just the timing was perfect for me to move my writing skill into content marketing. It was quite serendipitous because had I been 20 years earlier, that really wouldn't have been an option for me. I found SaaS pretty early on as well, and just software in general, and then SaaS. And just found that the pace of SaaS really matched my desire, the pace of work that I desired. So, that was really kind of like the coming together of my skills and an industry that really valued them.
Man, where did you grow up?
Kind of all over the country,
Yeah.
yes. But not because I had a military parent. I just had a mom who had a desire to move a lot. But I ended up finishing high school in Florida. And so found a really good state school and then went to college there. And the school that I went to had a really good Department of Communications where advertising was a really good major. And that's what I ended up majoring in.
That's awesome. And now you're at Insightly. What's the real focus right now? What are you up to there?
So,
and for those that don't know, sorry, what is Insightly?
Yeah, sure. So we are a CRM, and we are probably in the most competitive space there is in SaaS, right? There are literally 1,700 CRMs on the market.
Are there really? So, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. So if you're looking to buy my product, you have a lot of choices. If you want to see something depressing, look at the G2 grid for CRM, and you can't even read it because there are so many logos on it. It's insane. And so Insightly's in the correct quadrant. We're in the upper right. We have great brand presence and we have high performance, which is excellent, but we're competing against, giants. So we compete against Salesforce every day. And I know it was such a joy for me watching Caitlin Clark be brought into the WNBA. And she, was sitting there, she held up her jersey and everyone was so delighted. And that jersey had a Salesforce logo on it. And I just look at that and I'm like, that's what I'm competing with. Like they can put their logo on Caitlin Clark's jersey. Like our budget is just not that type of budget. However, I just feel like, Casey, I've always been the underdog in the marketing world. So, but my current company, we compete LinkedIn, we compete with Salesforce. My previous company, we competed with LinkedIn Learning. And then the one before that, our major competitor was HubSpot. So I've always been the David versus the Goliath. I think I really enjoy the underdog role because it lets you be creative. It lets you be edgy. You can
Yeah.
punch up a lot. You really can't punch down. If Salesforce started like running ads against Insightly, it would just look like it was in poor taste. But we can run all sorts of ads
Right.
against Salesforce because we're the underdog.
Totally.
So
Totally.
yeah, so it's a fun place to be when you're the underdog. But there are times where I look at the budget of our competitors and I just dream of one day having that kind of budget.
And you got to imagine at some of these places, your entire budget is their creative fun budget. You're like,
Yeah.
come on. But I'm looking at that grid and you're right. It's crazy.
Mm.
And having worked with Salesforce for like decades plus, there is no way that they're that level of satisfaction. So I don't know what G2 is smoking, but
It's a clunky product for sure. Like sometimes I wonder who's making those reviews. But that said, when you're the market leader, you can throw your weight around. You can create that ecosystem. They
yeah.
really put up barriers to competitors. So we're just hitting those barriers every day.
You know what? Give us a 5 out of 5 on G2 and we'll send you a sweatshirt and a Lamborghini. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm in love with Salesforce.
Exactly. It's the best thing ever.
I haven't spent any money on a system integrator whatsoever, every month.
Crazy. Crazy.
Oh man. But yeah, but I like that, the underdog, you get to be scrappy and punching
Hmm.
um and you get to try to win as opposed to try not to fail,
Right.
which seems like
Boring.
why I switched from being a goalie to wanting to be a forward because who wants to get who wants to lose the game for everyone as opposed to go win it?
That's a
Um,
great
totally.
analogy, Casey. It really is. And truthfully, I was with one company for 16 years and it was the market leader. And it was a very cush job. And I probably could have stayed there and retired there. But I really did get bitten by the startup bug and the being an underdog. And I have absolutely relished that role. And I look back at being the top dog at that last company with very little competition. And it just wasn't terribly exciting. It was like you're saying, you're just trying to stay out of the headlines. You're trying to avoid, you know, being in the spotlight. You're almost, you're putting logos on pen and like, that's just not challenging marketing for me. So kind of got bit by the startup bug. And then kind of my last couple of roles have all been in that startup space, which I love.
Totally makes sense. I checked you out on LinkedIn, and yeah, I see what you're saying. But yeah, how is that to have to be like anti-marketing? Like, okay, don't ruffle any feathers, don't make any noise.
Mhm.
We certainly don't want the CEO
Yeah.
to catch wind about anything happening anywhere.
No.
What? And then everyone just kind of checks in, and you're right, can just kind of go through the motions.
Mhm.
But you know, the good marketers, the creative ones are the ones who are like, let me try something,
Yes.
let me fail, but let me fight. Let me see what I can do.
Yeah. At that
That's awesome.
corporate job, I think I met more with legal and contracts more than I met with sales. And I mean,
Isn't that
they
right?
were lovely people, but that's just not what makes your marketing heart sing. It really isn't.
Corporate accounting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Budget meetings, certainly not meetings equipped for creativity.
No.
Um, yeah. Gosh, man. Um, well, I have a bit of a hypothetical question for you
Okay.
next. I hope you're ready for this. Okay. You see, I may or may not have a time machine over here in New
Okay.
Hampshire. So you come visit next event, Sightly's doing in Boston. You come drive up here. We'll hang out, get some lobster. It'll be fun. And we get to use a time machine. Cool time. Um, but it's a particular kind of time machine. And you get to go back in time and meet yourself 4 days after graduating with that journalism degree way back when in Florida.
Hmm.
And you get to talk to yourself. What kind of advice would you give yourself?
Yeah. So I was absolutely a broke college student. Lived in the dorms all 4 years because I couldn't afford anything else and, really scrimped and saved. And so I think coming out of college, I was probably pretty panicked about money. And I think I would say to her, the money comes. It really does. Eventually the money comes, but you really just have to focus on what you like doing, do it well, be tenacious, and just don't worry so much about the compensation, because I think that's true for most people's careers, is that eventually the dollars start to flow in, but not for her not to panic, because she had student loan debt too. So it was this feeling of, I'm never going to get out of this hole. I'm never going to be able to, be successful. And so just to focus less on money and just really do what you do best, because, eventually you're going to be rewarded for that.
Man, and it looks like you landed right in that company where you would spend a good period of time.
Yes.
Would you still do that company again? Would you still take that path as an adventure?
That's such a great question, because I have thought of that question myself so many times. And
Yeah.
so I was there for 16 years, which nowadays seems almost ludicrous, right?
It does, right?
But I will say during that time was the financial crisis, where so many people were losing their jobs and mine was extremely stable. And on a personal note, that company had on-site childcare, and I had 2 children during that time period. And
Oh,
so
wow.
when I look at the ingredients, how that company kind of insulated me from the financial crisis and allowed me to have my children close by when they were very little, it's hard to put a dollar amount on that, or it's hard to say to that those contributions weren't extremely valuable to me. So maybe it was, not the best move for my career, but for my work-life balance and for what was going on in my life outside of work, probably was a really good place.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, that makes a big difference. And sometimes being at I've been in some crappy companies. People just have to figure out which ones those are on LinkedIn. Not telling you. Actually, just let me know and I'll tell you.
Okay.
But I worked with some crazy companies, and it was like I was just fighting Jello. Like I'd punch to try to make something happen. It would wiggle.
Mhm,
Like it would acknowledge it. It
mhm.
would wiggle, but then nothing would ever happen. And I built up so much like pent up frustration from that when I finally got a chance to go do something, it was like, let's do this. I really appreciate now. Like, I wonder if that's the same with you, where you spent that time and you had to deal with those things that you had to deal with. It was good for your family. And now you're just like, let's go. And you're taking these companies and these startups and you're really embracing and enjoying it. Whereas in the past, you might have like still been worried about the money.
Absolutely. Startups are great, but so is health insurance. And, so there's a certain amount of risk you can take. And, those things were going on, the financial crisis, and I had young children, that's not the best time to take a risk. But then there was a time where it was like, okay, you've had the stability and now it's time to, see what you can do. Even taking a job as a head of marketing, I did that in my last role. I was the head of marketing, and that was a big leap for me. I had always been a leader on the marketing team, but I had never been in charge of the team. And I was like, well, it's now or never. I need to prove to myself if I can do it or not. And so ended up in a great place. The company was acquired, which was the goal, and so a super successful outcome. But just trusting myself that, okay, now is the right time, and I'm going to take this leap, and I'm going to be in charge, and there's not going to be anybody else to go to. It's just going to be me. And can I do that? And I was really proud of myself that I took that risk.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I can't wait to see what you're going to do at Insightly with all of this energy and natural energy too, because it's not coming from the caffeine, not coming from the caffeine. Do you miss the caffeine, or are you just so happy to be free from the cycle?
So I honestly think I'm one of those people that's hypersensitive to caffeine, because when I
Mm,
would have it, I would have like almost a euphoria and then like come off of it with like terrible anxiety. So it was just
sure.
never something that was great for me. And when I I started talking about it, people were like, you're in marketing and you don't drink caffeine. So the name of my blog is actually The Decaf Marketer, because I found it was the most unique thing about my marketing career was that I did not mainline coffee every day.
So good. And then you have to wonder if your coworkers were around you, do we want to catch you at the beginning of that coffee drink,
Yes.
not at the
No.
end of it?
For sure. Absolutely.
Well, hey, this has been absolutely such a cool conversation. Where can people connect with you, learn more about Insightly, and then get your blog? Where do you want them to go?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is probably the best place. I'm super active on there. And then I do have my own blog, The Decaf Marketer. It's just at The Decaf Marketer. Um, yeah, and Insightly, if you're looking for a challenger brand CRM that is way faster and way more economical than Salesforce, you might want to check us out. Don't want to be a commercial, but it really is. I've used Salesforce before. I've used HubSpot. I've used a lot of CRMs in my day, and it's a joy to use Insightly. So I definitely recommend people check us out.
Never have I ever the game kids play heard someone refer to a CRM as joyful. So that right there gets my attention. Like, we should enjoy the process of moving that stuff forward.
Yeah.
Hey, this deal's moving forward. Let's take care of it. So yeah, that's got my attention.
Great.
The joyful CRM. I'm excited. Val, thank you so much for coming on here. I feel like I have just not only have gone to school, but I felt like this was like the kind of conversation where I not only learned, but my brain was open to thinking about more questions and exploring more. So maybe you just have that vibe about you where you're just inspiring creative thinking around you as you go. So thank you for coming on here.
I really appreciate your time, and this was great. You asked excellent questions.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You inspired those. And for those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, because I literally 2 pages, I filled them up.
Nice.
This back one is just toast. I ran out of space. 2 pages of notes. I'm learning stuff. If you learned something too, share this episode. 1 person, 9 people, 3,000 people, whatever. But put what you learned. What's your takeaway? What was that one thing you got from this? Is it that proximity is not creativity? The time, the trust, the commitment, the giving commitment to the budget. If you're a leader, the culture, the trust, creating a space. There's so many good things. This is literally a book. If you haven't written it, Val, you need to write this one day. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Great to talk.
All right, everyone. This has been a crazy episode, crazy cool episode of the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will see you all next time.